There are a lot of skills that a person needs in order to become a successful game designer. Among them are things like being good at analyzing games, being creative, and being able to prototype game ideas. But is that all it takes? In my experience, there are some skills that are more important than others. These skills so happen to be intangible, and therefore a little more difficult to master. That is why in today's video, I want to share with you some skills that in my experience are invaluable to have as a game designer in order to be successful in your career. I'm going to talk about my personal experience and how these skills have helped me personally. So keep in mind, it is totally possible that your own experience might be different. Feel free to share your perspective in the comments below. The first and most important skill you need to develop is effective communication with others. This is not only about talking to your peers and taking feedback, but about actively listening to their concerns and being prepared to pivot whenever is necessary. As game designers, we normally hold the vision of a feature or mechanic. However, that doesn't mean that things have to be done the way the game designer says. That is why it is very important to always communicate with your artists and programmers effectively, making sure you are being clear in what you're asking of them. Some good tips are to ask them for their opinion, being generous when sharing details to avoid assuming they know what you mean and end up in miscommunication, as well as allowing them time to think and analyze what you presented. Listening to their concerns and point of view is also super important. This happened to me once when I was working on a feature with a programmer. I thought he understood what I was trying to communicate when I showed him a prototype. In my mind, I went above and beyond by walking him through it. It was crystal clear. However, when he showed me what he had done, it was very different to what I was envisioning. It turned out that he didn't understand what I was trying to say, and unfortunately meant we had both wasted our time since we hadn't communicated effectively, which made us both feel frustrated. What you can do to avoid this is making sure you allow your team to ask questions. Have them explain it back to you how they understood it to make sure you are communicating difficult or complex things properly, and allowing for them to think about it and get back to you later once they had a chance to digest what you shared. It's okay to follow up with them a couple days later to ensure there are no unanswered questions because different people process information at different times. The second skill that is very important to have is to be proactive. At least in my experience, people working in the industry appreciate others who go out of their way to do things beyond their scope. During a game cycle, there are times during which you work on prototypes, developing storyboards, or brainstorm about possible new features that might go into the game. This normally happens in pre-production. During this time, being proactive can come in handy, especially if there is something you strongly believe in. Many times I have worked on prototypes that have not been discussed before. It's nerve-wracking at first, but it's cool to get people interested in what you have to say when you share your prototype. Another aspect of being proactive is to always make sure you ask questions whenever you have them and not waiting until someone else does. If you have an issue or something about a feature isn't making sense, I try to be proactive and prompt to discuss it. It will probably help everyone in the development team, as it will help avoid conflicts or issues later on in the cycle. One personal example is when I was working on a prototype of a feature and some things were unclear to me and I couldn't easily find the answers on my own. To be specific, my questions were around us having the resources, technology, and time to get the task ahead of us done. As an introvert, this was super hard, but I pushed past that and got all the stakeholders together in a room to discuss the prototype and determine the feasibility. Even more important than my concern about what they would think of me was my need to ensure this idea would work for our game and that everyone was aligned with the vision. The feedback I got was that people felt this meeting saved everyone a lot of time and it helped us determine it was something we could work on after sorting through the details. The third skill I find very useful to have as a game designer is the ability to pivot very quickly. When you're working for a big company, you will see the environment is very fast-paced in nature. In this atmosphere, it is very important to be able to prototype features quickly so you can see if it works or move on if it doesn't. That is why it is important for you to learn to not to spend too much time perfecting something, especially if it's early on in the process. Game design is an iterative process, and the first idea you have about a feature is not going to reflect the final product. It's going to take a lot of work and iteration to arrive at something that is shippable. One experience I had in this area was when I worked on a prototype and spent a significant amount of time trying to make 3D models and textures. When my peers started playtesting and giving me feedback, I realized we needed to go in a different direction. I was bummed that I had spent so much time creating this amazing looking prototype and it was all for nothing. I learned that if I had spent that time iterating on a simpler prototype, it would have been a better investment of my time and for the game. Use your time wisely. The first skill that is very important to learn is to not be too attached to your ideas and be open to all kinds of feedback, even harsh feedback, from peers and from playtesters. When you come up with an idea, you treasure it because after all, it is your baby. You don't want it to be cut or rejected. Even when that happens, you need to be mature enough to understand and learn that every decision that is made at a studio is in the game's best interest. More importantly, even if your ideas are rejected, that doesn't mean you are not good or intelligent. It simply means that the idea you had doesn't fit the player experience the game directors are going for, or what they have in mind for the game. It can be hard, especially when it happens for the first time, but you have to learn to let it go. Similarly, this can happen during a formal playtesting session with users who don't know anything about your game. Normally, you are behind a glass and can't tell the player anything about how your game works. You can only observe. That is a scary experience when sometimes they say that the game sucks and that they don't understand what to do. Even worse is when they say the game isn't fun or who thought about this. I personally had this experience, and the worst one was probably when I was working on my thesis project. One of my professors tested my game, and let's just say she didn't hold back. When playtesting, she taught us to say things stream of consciousness so the designers can get the real and raw feedback. This means she said a lot of mean things that at the time hurt a lot, but now I understand that receiving that feedback made me a better game designer and it made my skin a little thicker. The fifth skill that is very important to learn is to be persistent. A lot of times, even before becoming a professional game designer, you need a lot of persistence to fulfill that dream, since it is so hard to get a job in the industry. Even when you get your foot in the door and start working at a studio, it is still important for you to still be persistent in getting better every day and trying to keep up to date with the industry. Our industry evolves daily, and as a designer, you need to keep learning to perform the job to the best of your ability. It is also important to have persistence when you really believe in a feature or an idea that you believe is good. Always try to fight for what you think is good, and even if you get a no from the directors, try putting together a prototype in order to prove your point. Who knows, maybe when they see it in a different presentation, they might change their opinion. In my experience, this happened really early in my career. I had been working maybe 3 months on the job, and we were in our pre-production cycle. I was working on something else, but I had an idea I was excited about. So I made time, and after work, I prototyped a feature I found exciting and cool. When I finished, I was able to show the directors of the studio what I had in mind. I was lucky to find they liked the idea and we were able to playtest the prototype. This goes to show you that everything is possible with persistence. However, don't think of persistence as being disrespectful or annoying. You have to know your boundaries and the culture of the studio where you work. I am a big proponent of working for what you believe in while being mindful and respectful of others. Worst thing they can say is no, and you will still learn from it. As you can see, there are a lot of skills that a game designer has to master in order to have a successful career, and this list doesn't even include all of them. As I said at the beginning, there are a lot more skills that designers need to master if they're to become better designers. The good thing is that by working on games and working with best practices, you're already learning a lot of lessons and skills this way. Just keep working and learning, and with time, you will learn those skills that will make you become the best game designer you can be. And that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. What are some skills that have helped you so far in your career as a game designer? Please let me know in the comment section below. Also, if you like this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. See you next time!